everyone, it's Marisa from BumblebeeApothecary.com, and today I'm going to take you along as we move into weeks 4 and 5 of introducing solids to our baby using the Baby GAPS diet. So for weeks 4 and 5, we are introducing 2 new foods, and just a little bit of background, we did take a little bit of extra time on week 3. We took, I think it was 2 or 3 weeks total to go through week 3, and the reason for that was he started teething for a little while, and so he really wasn't interested in the solid foods for a few days, so I just kind of went with that and took a break from the vegetables and the meat for a little bit. And what was interesting is during that time he started to be very interested in the meat stock and has been wanting more of that. So I went with that and increased his amounts as much as he wanted of the meat stock, and then slowly brought the vegetables and the meats back in. He's still most eager about the meat stock and not eating a very large quantity of the vegetables and meats yet, but that's okay. He's young enough that that's perfectly fine. He's getting most of his nutrition from nursing, and then the meat stock and whatever vegetables and meats he does eat just fills in nicely. So I'm just going with that. So the reason I'm sharing that is because if you find yourself in that situation where you're like, my baby doesn't want to move through these weeks as fast as Dr. Natasha has them laid out, that's okay. You can just go with it. You can spend some extra time on whatever week that you need to. And I think she even says that in there. So that's okay, just letting you know that. And so that's what we did, took some extra time there, and so now we're ready to move on to 4 and 5. So the first food that we're going to introduce is the raw egg yolk. So we did the skin sensitivity test with raw egg yolk on the inside of his wrist, and there was no reaction or anything there. So we're going to go ahead and start adding that to his meat stock. And at this point, we start introducing what I've made another video on when my 3rd child was younger, what I call the GAPS baby bottle, and that's the meat stock with some fat added, melted in there, some egg yolk, and some liquid probiotic food. Usually I'll do sauerkraut brine. And so at this point, that's basically what we're going to be making. I am going to start very slowly with a very small amount of egg yolk just to make sure that we're not causing any reactions, or what I think more likely the egg yolk does, because it's so nutrient dense, is it strengthens the body and kind of creates a little bit of die-off sometimes. I believe that's what happened with my 2nd child when he first started having egg yolk and got the rash on his face. So just from that family background, I just want to be careful to go nice and slowly with this. So I'm going to start by separating out an egg yolk from the whites, and then I'll set that into its own little container, and then you'll notice that there's a membrane around the egg yolk. I'm going to break open that membrane a little bit so that I can get the center of the yolk, and then I'm going to scoop 1/8 of a teaspoon out and then add that to his meat stock and start with that. And then we'll see how he does with it. If it seems to be fine, then we're going to slowly increase until he's getting a whole egg yolk in his bottle of meat stock per day. When I am doing these GAPS baby bottles with the egg yolk, and then this also helps with the fat that you add to it too. I like to add a little bit of extra fat to these, if you remember from that recipe. A little bit of lamb tallow or ghee or something like that. And so I have these bottle nipples that are cut with a little Y opening, and I really like that because they let the thicker liquid be able to come out more easily. So I like to use that type of a nipple with these GAPS baby bottles. So one logistical thing that comes up when you're just using a tiny bit of an egg yolk, like 1/8 of a teaspoon at a time, is what do you do with the rest of the egg? So what I do is I just keep it in one of these little glass containers, and then the next morning when we're cooking scrambled eggs, I'll just dump it in there when we're cooking those, and then it doesn't get wasted. So I always use a fresh egg yolk each time. I don't save it in the refrigerator and reuse spoonfuls from the same egg yolk. I do a fresh egg yolk each time, take what I need for his bottle, and then use the rest of it the next morning when I cook breakfast. The next food that we introduce somewhere in the 4 to 5 week period is cooked pureed apples. So Dr. Natasha says to do these the same way that you do for anybody else in the regular GAPS introduction diet, and I have a video on me making that cooked apple recipe like she describes, so I'll link that down below if you'd like to see me going through that whole process. But it's going to be the same thing. Peel some cooking apples, you cook them in a little bit of water until they're nice and soft, making sure to remove the stem and seeds and everything. And then once those are cooked nice and soft, you're going to puree them till they're nice and smooth, and then mix in plenty of good animal fat. So ghee or butter are really delicious, but if you're not doing those, tallow works really well also. So I personally am going to wait on the cooked apple step with our little guy for a while. I'm gonna wait until he's getting more of a substantial amount of those cooked vegetables and then the meat into him, and then start very slowly adding the cooked apples. I just don't feel like that would be a good idea to introduce apples when he's not having a larger amount of the meats and vegetables, if that makes sense. It's just a personal decision I'm making, and from my GAPS knowledge, I think it's smart to be careful and go slowly, especially with these sweeter foods. And then when the cooked apples are introduced, Dr. Natasha says to start with a very small amount as always, and then watch for any digestive symptoms, like if diarrhea shows up or something like that, then you know that you need to back off a little bit, wait a little bit, slow down, reduce the amount, that kind of thing. And if everything seems fine, you can slowly increase the amount. And then in this section also, she gives a little reminder that you should not use a microwave to heat up food for your baby or yourself or anybody, because she says that that's not a good idea. It changes the molecular structure of food, and it's healthier to just use the stovetop to reheat things. So I will use the stovetop or our toaster oven to heat up foods for ourselves and then the baby too. All right, I hope that you enjoyed that and found that helpful. Make sure to check out that description box to links to those related videos that I talked about, as well as links to free ebooks and other goodies and favorite things that we like to use. If you did like this video, give it a thumbs up, share it with anybody else that you think would like it or find it helpful or interesting. And if you're new to my channel, please hit that subscribe button. I get out new videos every week on nourishing recipes and natural living. Thanks so much for watching. See you next time. Bye.